and we do cover a wide range of topics. Next month, our topic is going to be new trends in garden design with Jonathan Jubin from the Maine Gardens in Spring City. So you can bring a lunch and bring your friends and join us for that. And the Lunch and Learn is just one of the programs that the Master Gardeners of Roane County offers. And it serves our county horticultural needs of the community. And as you can see, our trained volunteers conduct a wide range of programs and activities throughout the year. And we encourage you to join us either by becoming a Master Gardener or becoming a friend of Roane County Master Gardeners, or just casually dropping in on one of these visits that we have. And if you haven't already done so, there's a sign-in sheet by the back, and that way we know who's joined in. And you're welcome to put in your email address if you would want to be notified of future Master Gardener activities. And be sure to check the appropriate column if you're interested in getting more information about joining the group. And if you're joining us by Zoom, Facebook, or YouTube, please don't hesitate to ask questions in the chat found at the bottom of the screen. And we'll have time during the presentation for the speaker to answer those questions for you. And this month, we're pleased to introduce Celeste Scott. And she is going to present a program on growing cool season cut flowers. And she is with the UT Horticulture Extension Specialist in the Western region. And join me in welcoming Celeste.
Hey, well, good morning. I'm so glad to be talking with y'all. I know it's always more fun to be in person, but I'm glad that Zoom has, allowing us to connect with people farther away, across the state that we normally may not get to see or hear from on a regular basis. So thank y'all so much for thinking of me to ask me to come and speak for y'all today. And just a little bit more about my background. I'm a native West Tennessean, born and raised over here in the flat countries. My dad is a row crop and beef cattle farmer. My brother also farms. And we still live here on the family farm, my husband and I, and we've got 2 small children. We've already been basketballing, peewee basketballing this morning. So it's been a full morning already. And, I have just had a love for flowers ever since I was young. My father, in addition to, doing row crop farming, we had a truck crop patch with sweet corn, tomatoes, squash, all those types of things. So I grew up doing that. And that's actually how I paid my way through college. And I started working in a nursery when I was in high school, a local plant nursery, and I continued that through college and went to MTSU and majored in plant and soil sciences there in Murfreesboro. And from there, I joined Tennessee Farmers Co-op and worked in production agriculture for about 8 years before I came to Extension. And then I was the county extension agent for Madison County. That's right there in Jackson for about 9 years. And I just came into the role of horticulture specialist here in the Western region back in October after I had finished my master's in natural resource management at UT Martin. So just always had this love for plants and growing things. And I'm glad to be able to share one of these passions with you today on cool season cut flowers for home gardens. I can see a few of y'all in the room. Does anybody grow cut flower gardens already? A few? Has anybody tried growing cool season cut flowers? Okay, yay. So a few, good. So this is kind of an introduction. I'm going to take, the approach I'm going to take is just to kind of like introduce you to some of my top favorites, some of those that are easiest for home gardens. We're going to talk about those that do best when direct seeded in the garden and those that perform best when we transplant them. We're going to talk a little bit about timing, how to plan when to get those seeds out or started. And then we'll have time for questions as well. All right, so let's just jump in there. So first of all, I put this slide in, right? We are all familiar with these plants. We've got zinnias, sunflowers, gomphrena, goldenrod. these are our warm season annuals, kind of the gateway into the cut flower world. This is what everyone is very familiar with. I kind of refer to these as these are your girl next door flowers, right? Everybody knows her. Everybody is comfortable and familiar with her. But today we're going to talk about the new kid on the block. And so these are what we call cool season hardy annuals. Now, these plants have been around for a long time, but categorizing them into this cool season hardy annual category is kind of just like a mind shift, like a different way of thinking, a different way of categorizing these plants. And so what is a cool season hardy annual? These are plants that would typically only produce one crop a year, and they are hardy enough to survive the cold temperatures in your zone, in your winter zone. And so cool season hardy annuals are going to look different for folks depending on what zone they live in. Now, I looked up Roane County, and I know everybody is familiar. We've had this updated USDA zone map, and it looks like the majority of Roane County is in 7B now. Is that correct? Is anybody aware of what your zones are? Okay. And that is also what my zone here is here in Jackson. We used to be 7A, and they bumped us up half a step. So now we're 7B. And if you didn't know, what that means is the average annual low for 7B zones is over a 30-year average is 5 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, I'm not saying it's never going to get colder than that, right? Tomorrow in my neck of the woods, not tomorrow, on Monday night, it's supposed to be -3. So, these are, like I said, 30-year annual averages, but generally speaking, that's where we're looking at. So that's how we are deciding which of these plants are really going to be considered winter hardy. And this is hard for a lot of people to wrap their minds around, right? So you get these plants out there and you're nervous, you're afraid the cold's going to kill them, you don't know what's going to happen in the winter. And so it can be hard at first to kind of let go of those fears. But in order to be really successful with these, that's exactly what we have to do, because many of them, they thrive on these colder temperatures. And a lot of these that we're going to talk about were things that some of them I'd been growing for years, and we'll get to those. And others, I didn't think that I could really grow at all, just because it heats up too quickly here. Once spring gets going, sometimes it's like we skip spring altogether. We go right from like winter to summer. And so it would just get too hot and humid, and things like snapdragons would never elongate for me. Sweet peas would grow a little bit and maybe have a few blooms, but never really, get going and be beautiful, like the cut flower farms that I see in North Carolina and places with higher elevations where they have a lot of varying nighttime and daytime temperature. That has a lot to do with it when you're having lower nighttime temperatures than you do daytime temperatures. That makes a big difference with some of these cool seasons. So I'm still experimenting and learning, and I've had wonderful opportunities to travel all over the United States to visit cut flower farms through work with Extension. I've been on a tour of farms in Utah, Kentucky, North Carolina. We have lots of growers now in West Tennessee, and I look forward, and that's where a lot of these pictures came from. And of course, a lot of them are from my garden as well. So let's just jump right in. I threw one more picture in here just to get our mindsets in the right place as far as cool season hardy annuals. Think about all the weeds that germinate in your flower beds this time of year. This plant here on the left is a chickweed, okay? That plant sprouted in like October. It was a teeny tiny thing. It grew a little bit. And then once we hit December, its active growth just kind of stops, right? It's not continuing to get any bigger. It's just existing. It won't germinate until we have those cooler temperatures in the fall, and it thrives in the coldness of winter, okay? And then when it warms up, these will naturally die, and that's what makes these cool season weeds. And then the picture that we have here on the right, that is a picture of henbit. That's the plant that has little purple flowers. It grows in your lawns, flower beds everywhere. Both of these are real easy to weed out of the garden, but I always like to throw that in because I feel like that helps us understand what we're going for, right? That's what these plants that we're fixing to talk about love. They love those cooler temperatures. So let's just jump right in. And I might have picked too many. I told myself I was going to do my top 10, but the list grew as I went through my picture rolls. So we're going to start with those that do best being direct seeded into the garden. And so there's kind of two different tactics when we're going about this. You can be thinking in the mindset of incorporating these into your landscapes, whether that's like a perennial border or a place where you have annual color that you change out throughout the year, with annuals, petunias, zinnias, gomphrena, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can use these in that same fashion mixed into the aesthetic of your landscape. Or you can attempt to grow them in dedicated cutting beds. And towards the end, I'll have some pictures and examples of how you can do that. But one of my favorite things about just growing them directly into my landscape is that these that we're all going to talk about right here for direct seeding will reseed themselves. So once you do that first planting and get your first really good, well-established stand, they are going to feed themselves in the years to come. You're not going to have to continue to buy seed and continue to replant because they're going to perpetuate as long as we manage those areas properly so that we're not destroying our seedlings with too much weeding or mulching over the top of them and things like that. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So my first favorite is Nigella. And the common name for Nigella is Love in a Mist. And it just has these beautiful, whimsical, ferny foliage, the really unique, cool blooms. And then one of my favorites, if you leave those blooms to mature, they will actually develop into these really cool textured pods. And I mean, while I do love the blooms for, a home bouquet, my real drive as far as cut flowers go is for the pots, to use those in arrangement. So if you're looking at approaching this from like a small cut flower farmer approach or something like that, that would be where I would lean towards. But for a home gardener, man, I do love those blooms. And, it is really hard for me to go out into my landscaped areas where I have these direct seeded and cut on them, because I know once I cut them there, I'll get to enjoy them inside, but then I don't get to see the beauty that they're gracing my landscape with as well. So that's why you may want to have a designated area for cut flowers. That way you don't have to feel bad about cutting on them, right? And bringing them inside to enjoy. You can have them in both places. So I do love Love in a Mist. One thing to note when you are planting these, they prefer to be covered lightly. The seeds are very small, but they need darkness to germinate. So you may want to make notes. I'm going to try to mention that for every plant we talk about today. Next on my list is a plant called Orlea grandiflora. Some people, common name, call it lace flower. I prefer to just call it what it is, Orlea. That way we don't get confused. There are several flowers, the next 3 or 4, that look a little similar, and it can be confusing. So I call this Orlea. One of the cultivars that I really, really like is called White Finch. And y'all, I tried to put parentheses around the cultivar names, but this font that I used apparently didn't have parentheses in its in its text form. So I'll make sure and try to let you know what the common name is. This plant's common name is lace flower. This particular cultivar I like is called White Finch. And of course, the italicized name up there, that's the Latin name, Orlea grandiflora. These seed do not need to be covered. And this is a planting that I have in the landscape, and I just allow it to reseed itself from year to year. They would get taller if I thinned them. But man, I hate pulling out plants when there's nothing wrong with them. They're perfectly fine, right? They're looking great. If I have healthy plants growing, that means I don't have healthy weeds growing, right? We're out competing the weeds. So I just let them grow nice and thick. They get about 2 feet tall. in this beautiful mound, and they'll bloom for about 4 to 6 weeks, starting about in May. But you could have succession plantings with these if you wanted to put them in like a designated cutting area. And if you thinned them, they would get taller, and you could take multiple cuts off of one plant. So that's always really nice. So the next one that I wanted to talk about is Amy Magus. And this gets a little confusing because it kind of looks like Queen Anne's lace. And there are different types of Amy. And so one of the newest ones that has become really popular with cut flower growers is a cultivar called White Dill. And I was so perplexed because I was going to these cut flower farms and I was like, oh, what beautiful Amy this is. And they would say, that's white dill. And I was like, that's not dill. And the blooms on dill are yellow. It's a Brassicaceae, like, it has, I don't know, in the Apiaceae family, in that carrot family, but its blooms are yellow. And I was so confused until I finally figured out that is just a cultivar name. It's not actually dill that has a white bloom. It's Amy Magus, and the cultivar name is white dill. And so I'm not actually sure if those people even realized that or not. I think they were really in their heads thinking that it was dill because they were committed to the white dill. But Graceland is another one that's really beautiful, very lacy, has a nice open form, and can reseed beautifully in the garden. We don't want to cover Amy when we direct seed into the garden, okay? So don't cover those. Another type of Amy that I love for bouquets is Amy visnaga, a cultivar called Green Mist. And you can see the foliage is a lot more dense, especially up towards the top. And the bloom is a lot more dense. And it starts out when it's young as like a chartreusey green, matures to a white. But I really like to harvest it before the bloom matures and take advantage of that chartreuse color. It provides a lot of contrast in arrangements. And I just love the spikiness that it brings right there at the top as far as foliage interest goes. I'm going to go back. So the Amy Magus doesn't have really any foliar advantages. You know what I mean? I strip all that off and it's just a long stem with blooms on the top. But for a Green Mist, I still strip the stems, but the top like 6 inches, I leave all that really cute spiky stuff right there. So that one's really fun. Also, do not cover. None of the Amy's, we don't want to cover those when we seed. All right, the next one is Dacus carota. And this is, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, this is a type of Queen Anne's lace, right? Dacus carota is the Latin name for our wild carrot, the Queen Anne's lace that grows wild up and down roadsides and ditches. But this is a cultivated type. So it has been bred to have different characteristics. It still reseeds itself readily, but it's not nearly as weedy. So there's not as many viable seed. Also, it's this particular one is called Dara, and it has different shades of kind of burgundies to pinks to creamy whites. So when you plant it, you're not going to get 50% burgundy and 50% white. It's just this random kind of mix because the seed has that variation in its genetics. And there's a really nice cultivar that's really tall called Black Knight. And I think I have a picture of it here in just a little bit so you can see how tall it gets. But I love Dacus because it has super, super strong stems. As long as you harvest it at the proper time, they won't wilt. So I get that complaint a lot from folks who are growing this. They'll harvest it when it's in this stage right here. This is young, super tight. This one has started to open a little bit. They'll harvest it here, and the heads just droop and they never recover. You have to wait until that umbel gets about 90% like fully opened before you harvest them, or the necks will just wilt over and they won't come back up. Sometimes even when you do harvest them at the proper time, they will wilt. But if you have a hydrator in your harvest water, and just let them rest for a few hours in a cool area. They'll pop right back up. So I really love that one. Oh, this one is a plant from my childhood that I loved so much. And my Sunday school teacher gave me my first little packet of bachelor buttons when I was about 8 years old. I think that was the first thing that I planted from seed. So Centura cyanus is the Latin name for this plant. Lots and lots of options for cultivars out there. Classic Magic has been around for a long time. Tall Boy Blue is another that has really nice, tall, strong stems. But again, I mean, I've tried probably 6 or 7 different cultivars and I've loved them all. This is also one of the most cold hardy of these cool season hardy annuals. So I am not concerned about my bachelor buttons surviving this cold weather that we're fixing to have. I'm actually not going to cover up any of my cool season hardy annuals that were seeded in the fall that are up and growing. I'm not going to touch them when this weather is coming. It's supposed to snow here. I'm not sure what it's supposed to do there. But snow and ice are nature's insulators. So if they're covered in snow and it's 32 degrees, that means they're not exposed to the -3 air temperature. And I'm glad for that. So definitely not trying to cover these up with anything. Okay, another one that really is so whimsical to me and brings back memories of my childhood is larkspur. And so this one's a little confusing because the Latin name is Delphinium, right? It's in the same genus as Delphinium, what we think of as the perennial Delphinium. However, perennial Delphiniums don't perform well where I live. It gets too hot and humid in the summer and they are not persistent. So I prefer to grow larkspur. It's an annual. The seeds are easy to harvest. It's an excellent, easy seeder, so doesn't usually present lots of problems when you're trying to direct seed into the garden. Has great straight stems as long as you give it some support so it doesn't fall over. And comes in lots of different shades of these beautiful pastels. And I think my favorite is Giant Imperial. That's kind of an older heirloom variety. A master gardener friend of mine gifted me with some seed from her collection. And so that's what I've been going with for the past several years. But I've also tried several different colors in the QIS series. If you wanted to get something that was a little more bold and kind of leaning away from pastels, you have a few more options in of color in that series. All right. The next one that I wanted to put on here is poppies. And I have mixed feelings about poppies. I have done them several years. I mean, I feel like I try them every single year. And I have been unsuccessful at establishing a large patch. But I'll show you some pictures in a minute. I do have some started in a designated cutting garden area where the ground was prepared properly. I was sure not to weed around them. There was no mulch in the area. People weren't walking through these beds. The seeds are so small that they need light to germinate. They don't like to be covered, and too much stuff happens in my garden. Like I'm walking through my, perennial borders. I'm weeding, I'm stepping on stuff. And I guess I'm just too disruptive to get poppies going in my landscape. But I do have some going in the cut flower garden area. And I've got pictures of 2 different kinds on here. So this one right here, where we're looking at these beautiful pods, this is actually a Papaver somniferum. That is the opium poppy. It's red, it's your typical. And there's so many beautiful types of poppies now, lots of hybrids. But I really love these opium poppies for the seed pods that they develop. The flowers don't last very long. I wouldn't even really approach them as far as a cut flower to bring inside and enjoy goes. I would just let those mature and develop those pods. Last year I grew a giant pod poppy. They were like huge. They were like almost as big as a little smaller than a baseball. I mean, they were really cool. But if you are interested in actual poppies for bringing inside and enjoying. You might want to consider the Icelandic poppies. That's Papaver nudical. That's the species name for this particular type of poppy. They're really dreamy. Roughly, you can harvest them in this really tight bud stage. These were harvested too late. I just laid those up there on the table so you could see what they look like. These, you want to harvest them when they're at that marshmallow stage, still firm, but give a little bit when you press on that bud. And then after you cut them, what we were doing right here, we were actually burning the ends of those stems and sealing them off, and you can store them in dry, cold storage. If you have just like an extra fridge outside, you can store them like that for like a couple weeks. And then when you get ready to enjoy them, bring them out as you need them. And when they get inside into these warmer temperatures, they'll begin to open. So I thought that was really cool and fun. Okay, this is straw flower or helichrysum. Some people call them everlastings. They come in a wide range of colors, and they're often confused for a warm season annual because they're not really putting on their display until we get into the warmer months of the year. But they do best if started when the temperatures are cooler. That's when their roots really will thrive and shoot down deep roots. And that's when it does the majority of its vegetative growth during the cooler months of the year. And then they initiate bloom when we get into longer days. So if you've never tried straw flower, I would encourage that you do it. They're great for drying. That's why we call them everlastings. I remember these from my childhood as well. They were always fun to do arts and crafts with, and pretty easy. I think the thing to keep in mind is that you need good drainage for these. If you have a low spot or a wet area, well, they're going to rot. They are not going to be happy. You can direct seed in the garden. You can also start these inside as transplants. I have only ever started them in the garden just because that's what my garden mentors around me had done for years, and that's how I was trained up, but you can do them either way. So that concludes my list of easy direct seeders. And then we're going to get into some that are a little more finicky, but still need direct seeding. So this is Blapurum. It's great for foliage and filler in bouquets. And what makes it a little more tricky is that it needs a cold treatment before you plant it. So like at least 2 weeks in the freezer, not in the refrigerator, in the freezer. And when you plant these seeds, they need to be covered. And they do not like to be transplanted. I've tried them. I've tried starting them inside because the seed are expensive than most of my other bloom stems. But I just, it's hard to do it that way. So I would encourage you to buy more seed than you need, seed them very heavily in the garden, and then thin. And that's really the best way to get a dependable show on those. And then everyone's favorite, bells of Ireland. Again, I struggled for years. I try. I could never grow them. The trick is you got to start them in the fall. They also require a cold treatment. So we want about at least 2 weeks in the freezer. And then when you bring them out of the freezer, the seed coat is very hard. So it would benefit if you soaked them in just like, warm water for a day or two. And when you plant these, you don't cover them. So the ones that don't need cover can be challenging if you have any kind of rodents in the garden, moles, voles, dogs, cats, anything like that. If anything walks over the top of that or disturbs the bottom of your bed, the seeds are going to fall down, and you won't get good germination on those. Okay, I've got to go faster. It's 11:30. I only got through the direct seedings. I'm gonna speed it up here for the transplant section, but there's not as many, so we can be grateful for that. Okay, so now we're getting into cut flowers that do better. They're transplanting. That means we're going to start them indoors and then plant them outside. Okay, so this is calendula or pot marigold. And when we did some cut flower workshops across the state last year, one in each region. And this was actually the #1 favorite cool season flower for East Tennesseans. And that was pretty impressive to me because there are not many people who grow calendula. over here in the Western region, but I have grown it for 2 years in a row now, and it's done pretty good. You can see some of these older spent flowers in the background, but lots of variation out there. You can even get some peachy tones in calendula now. So that's really fun. And you want to start these indoors, and the seed prefer to be covered. They need dark for germination. Okay. Dianthus barbatus. This is Sweet William, an annual Sweet William, not to be confused with the teeny tiny little bitty stubby Sweet Williams that we buy, you know, in early spring to add to pots or mix in with pansies. One of my favorite series is called Amazon, and it has lots of different colors. They're very vibrant colors. And you can see here, this is not my picture, but you can see how long the stems can get if you plant them in the fall. That's the trick to getting really long stems on some of these plants that we say, well, I've done that before, and they don't even get, you know, tall enough to make a really good cut. It's because they don't have enough time to get established. So we want to focus, really try to focus on planting all of these that are cold hardy. That's why we're putting the focus on the cold hardy. Get them started in the fall, help them over winter, and then they'll get a jump start on spring. But if you miss the fall planting, that's okay. We're going to have an opportunity to do some early spring planting as well, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. I know I'm going to get to it, I promise. Okay, next one on my list, feverfew, great filler. This is like the best substitute for like baby's breath. You know what I mean? So we're kicking baby's breath out of the forest, and we're replacing that with feverfew. Lots of different options. The one that we're looking at right here is called Tetra. There are some that are more daisy-like. Vigma single is one that looks more like a daisy. And then there's some that look like perfect little puff balls, little spheres. That would be Vigma and Virgo. But lots of good options there on feverfew. I like the smell of it. Some people don't like the smell. It kind of has like a marigoldy almost type kind of smell to the foliage. So that's something to keep in mind. Yay! Now on to my very most favorite. These are snapdragons. And I tried and tried for years and years and was never successful with snapdragons. They'd only get about 8 inches tall, and that's all that I would get out of them. And guess what? I was just growing the wrong kind, right? So you can't go to the nursery and buy the 6 packs of snapdragons that they're selling. That is not what you want for cut flowers. We need to be paying attention to the category that they are in. That's going to determine how early in the season or later into the summer that they bloom. That way you can get a staggered harvest throughout the season. And there are the typical snappy, but some of my favorites are these open face doubles right here. Madam Butterfly is beautiful and has good color options. But lots of really fun things going on with snapdragons. You do not cover these, and you have to start them as transplants. The next one is stock, and this is another that I just never thought that I'd be able to grow, but believe it or not, stock is even a little more cold hardy than snapdragons are. So one of my favorite series here is the Katz series, Katz, and they're going to have really nice, tall, strong stems. This picture is from a grower I visited who is growing in a high tunnel, but you can definitely grow these outside in the field as long as you are going to have some row cover to supplement that with, and I'll show you that in a minute. Okay, moving right along. When to start what, right? So we've kind of been alluding to this, but let's talk a little more in detail about this. So it's important that we understand what our frost dates are. So I looked up the nearest weather station that I could find to you all, and it looks like it was going to be Knoxville. So that's what I went with as far as selecting our frost dates. So when we look at these charts where they're telling us what our frost dates are for our last spring frost and for our first fall frost, this is actually what we call our 90% frost dates. That means that there is only a 10% chance that temperatures lower than 32 degrees will happen after April 28th, okay? And then for the fall, which is really what we are focusing on for our fall plantings, is this October 8th date. That means that there's only a 10% chance that we'll have a frost before October 8th, okay? So keep those dates in mind as we're looking at this planning calendar right here, and I base this off of y'all's dates. So let's say that we are trying to decide when we should start direct seeding our Cool Season Hardy annuals for the Roane County area. We go to our 90% frost date, which is right here, October 8th. We're going to count back 6 weeks, okay? 1, here, and then here's September. 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we go over here to August, 6. So here's week 6. Here's week 8. And so anytime in this zone right here would be a great time to get things direct seeded that are Cool Season Hardy, okay? However, I rarely get things done in this time frame. And I have planted Cool Season Hardy annuals all the way up into mid-November. And I know that sounds ridiculous. They don't get a lot of fall growth on them, but they are still rooted in and they're still established. And some things, sometimes plants can overwinter better when they're smaller. You don't want them to grow too big, right? We don't want to start them too early so that we have this huge plant that then has to go through all this stress. We want a tight, slow grow plant, okay? Tight and slow. So this is what we're looking for is ideal times for direct seeding outside so that you get some substantial growth and you feel good about going into winter. If you are wanting to do some things that are going to need to be started indoors, we need to add about 6 to 8 weeks on to that time frame because we've got to get those started before we can transplant them into the garden. So let's count back from week 6 right here. We go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So here's week 6. Here's week 8. So this is your window for starting Cool Season Hardy transplants indoors. The 1st of July. The first 2 weeks in July, you have to be thinking about what kind of plants you want to be harvesting next spring. That's kind of a long outlook, and it can be a little, daunting. But these are ideal date ranges, and in the long run, they really don't mean that much. I have had situations where I didn't start things until August, and I didn't get them planted until October, and they did okay. Yeah, maybe I could have had better success if I had stuck to my calendar a little better. But don't get too caught up on the numbers because if you miss the window, then you'll just be frozen in inaction. You see what I'm saying? Like, don't just keep waiting. Just do it, right? You're never going to be able to learn unless you just get out there and do it. So that's what our fall planting chart looks like. Now we're going to look at it for spring. And we're going to do the same thing. Your last frost date is April 28th. Let's count back 6 to 8 weeks for direct seeding. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then here's 8. So we're looking at the first 2 or 3 weeks of March for getting things direct seeded for what we call very early spring planting. So if you miss direct seeding in the fall, you can have another shot at doing that here in very early spring. And then if you want to try transplants that you didn't get in the ground in the fall, guess what? You can do that as well. Count back 6 to 8 weeks and you end up right here in this kind of like end of January, 1st of February zone. And I am actually, even though we're in the same zone, my frost dates are about 2 weeks in front of you all's. So I actually have some things started right now that I'll show you in a minute. These are 2 new beds that I've added to the designated cut flower area this year. You can kind of see, I just came in here, I took up the sod. This used to just be grass in this area. We tilled it. I came down through here with the tiller that has like a row maker on it and just went down through, made a middle and threw the dirt up on the sides. I came in with compost. I estimated, I don't know, about I was trying to add about 2 inches of organic matter. So I came in with compost down the middle. And then I know this one's hard to see, but there's soil here. There's soil on the right. And then I put that compost down the middle and then I mixed it all in. And this is what it looked like on the left once I got that bed flattened off on the top. So I didn't have any special equipment. I just did this with a a bow rake, you know, a metal bow rake and a tiller. So this is how I prepared my bed. I wanted to make sure I had some nice organic matter in there. So I added that compost. And then I took a little hoe and I pulled one row down this side. I pulled one row straight down the middle, and I did one row on the left side. So I had 3 rows that had perfect hoe distance in between each row. So I could come and make sure that I kept in between those seedlings cleaned out without disturbing my seedlings as they were growing. So if you just needed some ideas on how to get started with these cool seasons, intentionally planting them in rows, this could be an approach for you. We don't have time to talk about details for starting seeds indoors. I think we should do a whole nother class on that. It's one of my very most favorite topics. I always use heat mats and artificial lights for growing indoors. The past several years, I've started soil blocking the majority of my cool season plants. It's really fun, very satisfying. As my kids would say, they watch slime videos and they say that's satisfying. So to me, soil blocking is very satisfying. And but if you don't have soil blocks, that's okay. You can use traditional methods as well. Hey, I use whatever I have. Okay, I'm not picky. If I've got an old Tupperware bowl laying around, I'll grow something in it. So it doesn't have to be anything fancy. And then this is a picture of those 2 beds that I showed you. I literally took this like a week ago on a sunny day. And it looks like there's not much happening there, right? You look at it and you're like, she's an awful gardener. And actually, I don't have anything planted in this bed because I'm gonna put fabric down here and do some other experimental things. Maybe we can share about that at another class. But this is where I did the majority of my direct seeding right here. And when you take a closer look, oh, I accidentally took a picture of my face when I was trying to get down on the ground. I thought I'd throw that in so y'all could see how much fun I was having. I was like, where are they? I knew they were there, but they were hard to find. So let me show you what they look like. And so these next pictures are a mixture of things that are in those beds and then things that are in my landscape, how they look when they're teeny tiny. And then I'll show you kind of how they look as they progress. Okay. So what we're looking at right here, these are seedling Orleas. And then see these teeny tiny ferny ones? Those are seedling Love in a Mist. And I think this one is actually Larkspur. And you can see here's the Orlea up close. I tried to get one really, really up close so you can see what that looks like. These are things that just reseeded themselves in my landscaped beds. So you got to be careful with being too aggressive on your weeding. And then this is that same area, what it looks like when it's active and full and growing. Here's that Love in a Mist. There's some salvia. You can't see the larkspur. It's back here behind this daylily thing over here. But so you can see how they can play well in a mixed border. And then there's a better picture of some of those mature pods, just so you can see what that looks like when they get big and beautiful. These are Orlea seedlings that I have just allowed to reseed themselves in the gardens. You remember the ones that I told you I had planted? I just let them come up way too thickly, and they might do better if I thin them, but I don't. The first 2 leaves are these straight strappy leaves, okay? Those are the cotyledons. The true leaves are these little ferny ones that emerge afterwards. So don't get too antsy with your weeding. Like I said, if you see them and you think that's some kind of grassy weed, annual ryegrass or something trying to sprout, just hold off. Here is what that area looks like when they're about half grown. So these were taken last spring. I just let my leaves mulch the area. I don't clean my leaves out. I like it. And then this is what it looks like when it gets nice and big once we get like into to May and have those blooming there. This is a picture of the bachelor buttons. So we're back into the cut flower bed and I'm down on the soil level. So you can see all these teeny tiny seedlings. Again, I was way behind schedule on direct seeding. I did not do this until the middle of November. I should have just been punished dreadfully for that. But I knew that they'd be okay. And those bachelor buttons, like I said, are super tough. So I know they're going to make it. They're going to be fine. I'm not worried at all. These are Sweet William seedlings that I had actually started inside and planted in the fall. They look like they're doing okay. You can tell they're a little more evenly spaced than my seeding job over there that I had done. And this is a cut flower farm that in North Carolina. She had a beautiful full bed of Sweet William here. That was just fixing to start blooming, by the way. You don't see a lot of color there. This is the seedlings for green mist, that Amy Visnaga that I showed you all earlier. And it looks very similar to the seedlings of the Orlea and Larkspur even as well. So you can see it starts out, oh, not Larkspur, Dara is what I meant. So you can see we start out with these strappy leaves and then have ferny leaves. And then that's what your green mist looks like when it gets good and big. And then these are Icelandic poppies. I seeded them very, very heavily, and you never thin poppies. They're also very cold hardy, so I'm not concerned with them either. We took a look at those earlier. And then these are larkspur seedlings. So they look different. And this is misleading because when they get big, their foliage is very ferny. But when they're little bitty tiny babies, they just have these two perfectly little oval seedlings. And you can see I've got a really good stand. I'm super down close to the bed. So there's actually 3 rows of all of these seedlings that I've been showing you in each bed. And that's what larkspur will look like when it grows big and tall. And then this was a picture of my stock transplants from the fall of 2022. I didn't do any fall stock this year. I started them too late because I was on vacation, and I planted them too late because I got the flu. And they looked good. The transplants looked good. I got them planted. We had a warm November. Everything was going okay. This is Sweet William and stock and snapdragons. And then the new beds that I made this year are over here to the left of these two. And so you can see I went ahead and had my frost cloth out, my floating row, well, it's a floating row cover. And I had some hoops out there because it's fixing to get cold. And I like to use wheat straw in my middle. So I had everything laid out for when it was going to get cold. And then we had the Arctic blast, right? The few days before Christmas. And I did not anchor my floating row covers. This is how you should not do it. Don't do it like this. Bricks aren't enough. You need something heavy. I have now invested in some bags that I fill with sand. They weigh about 15 pounds a piece. I put 3 anchors here, and you don't want to wad it up like this at the end. You want it flat, right? You want to pull that flat. I was thinking I needed to pull it together and kind of twist it. But that is not the method to take. You put 1 here, you put 2 on the corners, and then you put another bag on each side of every single hoop, and the hoop should only be about 10 feet apart. And so I did this improperly. The covers blew off, and everything died, except for my direct seeded cold hardy annuals. So the things that I know are very, very hardy, like the all the ones that we talked about at the very beginning. So the stock died, the snapdragons died, my Sweet Williams died, but that was my fault. So learn from my mistakes. Hopefully these tips will help you as you get farther into your cut flower growing experience. And I would love to have another talk sometime in the future, and we can cover high investment cool season flowers, things like ranunculus, tulips, anemones, daffodils, all that fun work. But we'll have to save that for another day. And so I thank you. I feel like I went long. I tried to talk really fast, but I have plenty of time to answer questions as long as y'all have questions to ask me.
All right. Well, thank you, Celeste. And we appreciate you sharing your knowledge and enthusiasm with us.
Yeah, no problemo.
And were there any questions that anyone had?
On the chat. I'll do that. Wait.
Oh, okay.
Is anybody in the room?
Celeste, how long have you been doing the cool flowering?
been cool flowering. Well, I was cool flowering before I knew I was cool flowering. So I've been growing larkspur, nigella, orlea, and dara for probably 10 years, just as part of my landscape, right? Where I work those into my borders. But I didn't realize that that's what I was doing. You know what I mean? I wasn't really in that mind frame of, hey, these are actually coming up in the fall. Like I just never had paid, close enough attention to it. But I've intentionally started learning more about cool season and trying to experiment with new things that I've never grown before for about the past like 4 growing seasons, I guess. So, I've had lots of failures. I'm not going to say it's all worked out perfectly, but those were on me, right? Like I missed my dates. I was trying, but I got 2 little kids. I was in grad school. I had a full-time job, so I had lots of things going on. But the small successes are what, uh, fuels you to move forward, right? When you harvest a stem of stock that is so fragrant, or a bunch of sweet peas that just have an intoxicating aroma, I mean, that just gives you the passion to say, hey, I can do this better and I'm going to try again, right? So just getting out there and seeing how things work in your garden.
Right. I do have, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna ask, where's a good place to get the seeds that you mentioned? And did you say maybe March for this area if we missed the fall planting? Was it March that we could plant seeds direct?
Yeah, here, look, I'll come back to this chart real quick just so you can have a visual on that. Here we go. So for very early spring planting, if you're wanting to direct seed some stuff, yes, you would be looking at super early March. And you know what? Our temperatures are so weird nowadays. I mean, we had 50 degrees for 4 days, last week. So after this cold snap that we're fixing to have, if you see in the forecast that it's going to be in the mid 50s for 5 or 6 days, I'd go ahead and direct seed. Make sure you water it in. That's also key. Sometimes I would direct seed things and not keep them watered. Guess what seedlings need? They need water. So, that's important, especially if you're trying to do this intentional beds with rows. You need to hand water those every couple of days to make sure they have the moisture that they need. And I mean, you could get them to germinate, I believe. But according to our plan, 6 to 8 weeks before our last frost, we'd be looking here at March for direct seeding. But like nigella, larkspur, bachelor buttons, I would not be hesitant to go outside today and just sprinkle some out in a garden spot. You know what I mean? You need to make sure you pull mulch back, and you want the seed to come into contact with soil, not just lay on top of mulch.
But don't pull the mulch back over the seed.
No. Yes. Yeah, don't pull the mulch back over the seed. So you're just going to have to like make you a little area. Sometimes I will take some sand and kind of like put it in a circle, you know what I mean? So that I know that I planted something right here to kind of remind me. I've also taken spoons, little plastic spoons, and written whatever it is on the spoon and stuck it down like in the middle of each of my circles, so that when it is time to weed and pull out those cool season henbits, chickweed, all that kind of stuff, I can remember, hey, I intentionally planted something right here. Be careful in this zone. Yes.
I think she asked what's a good source for seeds.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I forgot. Good source for seeds. So I buy seeds from all kinds of places. Imagine that. Look, I even have my seed box right here, ready to show y'all because I knew somebody would ask. So I buy seeds from Select Seeds. It is, they have a lot of like antique heirloomy type flowers. So like, here's an example of a Select Seed packet. They have really good information and instructions. I love to buy from the Gardener's Workshop. I don't know if y'all have ever followed any of the Gardener's Workshop stuff. That's Lisa Mason Ziegler. She was actually the author of the book Cool Flowers. And this is really how I got into Cool Flowers and where I started. So if you're really interested in this and learning more and having all of this information like at the tips of your fingers, buy this little book. It's not huge. It's a fun little read. I read it in like a rainy Saturday afternoon. And I have notes all in it and a whole nother little note handbook to go along with it. Where else do I buy seeds from? I'll buy seeds from Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds quite often. Baker Creek Heirloom. And then I just collect seed from friends, you know. So these are some red opium poppies from my friend down the road. I have packets of all kinds of seeds because I just like to share seeds with my friends. Where else do I buy them from? I bought things from Johnny's. I bought things from Ferry Morris. That was called, yeah, Ferry Morris. Harris Seed. But my favorites for these flowers, cut flowers, are Baker Creek and Select Seed and the Gardener's Workshop. Yeah. Those are my favorites.
Anyone else?
I'll go one real quick. Can she hear?
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right.
I can hear you.
You very quickly mentioned gladiolus. Do you have any for making those stalks stronger to where they will support themselves? What are some suggestions there?
Suggestions for gladiolus. If you are planting them just like in your landscape, I would say make sure that you plant the corms at the proper depth. If you plant them too shallow, they'll flop. So make sure you're getting those a little deeper. Make sure that you're buying larger corms. So those are going to make stouter, stronger stems. They actually have like measurements that are associated with them. Like they'll say this is a size 5 corm. I think that means like 5 centimeters or something like that. But they grade them. And so at a box store, those are probably like 2 or 3 centimeter corms. If you want really good quality cut flower gladiolus corms, you need to order those through a supplier who is, you know, providing those for cut flowers. And you're going to get really tall, strong stems. But I will also say, if you're doing it for business, like wanting to make money off of it, or you just want to have really, really good quality cut flowers in your home garden, you need to use netting to help those stand up. So let those grow through Cortova. It's like a plastic 6-inch by 6-inch netting. Make sure that you use that, and then it'll prevent them from falling over. And not too much fertilizer. Heavy fertilizer can make them floppy.
Good info. All right, anyone else have any questions or? All right, well, thank you, Celeste. And we appreciated having you visit with us today, and you gave us some good ideas.
Awesome. Well, I wish y'all were here with me and we could have just gone and walked around outside and y'all could have got down there on the dirt at the soil level and checked it all out. But I'm glad that y'all had me come and it was fun. Y'all are the first group that I gave the Cool Season Flower Talk to. So let me know what you thought.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Stay warm this week. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.